All right, we're ready to get started here today. So thanks everybody for joining us for today's discussion. The topic for today is Taming Your To Do's, Project Management for CS Success. We're going to have a really awesome discussion with two incredibly bright minds in the customer success space. Ashna Patel from Ascent Cloud and CS Insider, and Kate Current from Novodea. You know, it's interesting, the average customer success manager spends all of their time managing at least 50 accounts, if not more, is what we hear from people that we talk to. Imagine the amount of stuff they have to do in order to keep all of the balls in the air and not drop anything on the floor. It's an incredible amount of work. And so thinking about like how they should make prioritization a priority is something we're going to cover today. So without further ado, let's get into the conversation. What we're going to talk about today is how CS professionals do project management, and really, like, are they project managers? What type of skills do they need in order to get their job done? How can they prioritize their work and tools and techniques that we can help them do that? And how to operationalize all of this and measure the right things that they're doing to know if you're doing a good job at it. So before we jump in, got a couple quick things to cover. The discussion is going to be recorded, so you don't have to worry about if you miss part of it. We're going to be posting the recording on UserIQ's website as well as on our YouTube. We're going to be doing a couple polls during the discussion today. And so we encourage everybody to respond to those polls because we're going to be talking about the results as the discussion unfolds. And then lastly, if you have any questions for the panelists as the conversation goes on, please type them into the question box. I'm going to be watching that, and I will infuse your questions into the conversation as we go along. So, all right, let's get into it. A couple introductions, and then we'll get started. I'm Dan Bonet. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of UserIQ. At UserIQ, our mission is to help customer success teams give them the power to predict outcomes, impact company growth, and deliver that through the most intuitive, action-oriented platform on the market. Next, we're going to hear from one of our panelists, Kate Current from Novodea. Kate, if you don't mind taking just a few minutes and telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do for Novodea, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So I'm currently the head of delivery and customer success at Novodea. Novodea is a startup based in Israel, and we provide insurance brokers and MGAs and other insurance entities with a Salesforce-based agency management system. I spent a lot of time in the insurance and insurtech arenas. And today, and when we talk about prioritizing, I have prioritized this webinar over the NBA World Championship Parade. For NBA fans, you know a little bit about the Milwaukee Bucks, but I'm excited to be here and share some wisdom along with Ashna.
I appreciate that. Thank you for not canceling on us at the last minute. We don't know what we would do to get somebody to replace you, so really happy to have you here with us. Next up, we have Ashna. Ashna, please, if you don't mind giving us a little bit of a background on who you are and what you do for CS Insider, as well as Ascent Cloud, that would be fantastic, and then we'll jump in.
Of course. Thank you so much. Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm super excited for today's session. This is Ashna Patel. I'm a manager of customer success and support team at the company Ascent Cloud. And Ascent Cloud is it's a company. We have a couple of different products off of Salesforce App Exchange. One is a performance management product called Level 11. The other one is a mapping solution. Basically help you visualize your Salesforce data on the map. It's called GeoPoint. So I'm in the B2B SaaS in tech industry right now. I've been in customer success for over 4 years now, and doing the management piece of it for almost a year now. So super excited to be here. This topic is really close to my heart because there's a lot that we're going to get into with Kate. I'm just excited to jump right in. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Really nice to have you here with us, Ashna. So looking forward to what both of you guys have to say about these topics. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to do is do an audience poll around how you guys are doing certain things with customer success today. So very excited to see your feedback and would appreciate if everybody can participate. The question at hand is, do you consider project management to be a core skill set customer success managers or leaders? Take maybe 30 to 45 seconds to address this question, and then we will talk about the results. All right, so the results are in, and it looks like almost 80% of the people said yes, that this is a core, project management is a core skill set of customer success managers. And the remaining 20% either said no or hadn't considered that before. So let's start with Kate. How would you have answered this if you were still in your CS role? And how do you think about it today as a CS leader?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with most of the respondents. There's definitely a large amount of project management involved in customer success. And I know customer success is a lot of different flavors. So if a CSM is managing an implementation or a renewal process, there you've got project management working towards a specific outcome. And even CSMs who are spending a good amount of time in adoption, or maybe they're solely devoted to adoption, are executing action plans and success plans. So they're getting a customer from point A to point B, and they're managing expectations and celebrating wins. So I agree with the audience, Dan. I totally think project management is important to a CS.
Awesome, thank you, Kate. And Ashna, how about you? Are you surprised by the results at all, or is this pretty much what you were walking in thinking as well?
Pretty much what I was thinking of, and I think I was really positive that we were going to get yes for the most part of it. Although I am pretty surprised about the no, or the couple of no's that we've got, and I'm curious to see if that would change by the end of the sessions. And so I think that's what I would add.
Yeah, awesome. All right, we need to come up with some questions where it's not such a swing one way or the other. We got to make these sessions a little bit more healthy in our next batch of questioning. All right, cool. So let's move into our first topic, right, which is our customer success project managers. So we're going to talk a little bit about this a little bit more. And again, to the audience, as a reminder, if you have questions about this as we are going through the conversation, please feel free to type them into the question box. But let's talk about customer success professionals as project managers. Maybe explain a little bit about your view of the day-to-day, week-to-week activities and things that a CSM has to do their job really well, and why you think that translates into a project management type of role. Sorry, Ashna, why don't you hit us off with this one first?
Sounds good. It's an excellent question that, can our customer success professionals project manager? I would say yes, 100%. Every customer success professional is, I would say, in my eyes, an unofficial project manager. You've got that you've got that degree or certificate of being an unofficial project manager, because I think project management is part of, or it needs to be a part of your customer success strategy. Whether it's, as Kate was mentioning earlier, whether you're working on an onboarding piece of it, whether you're working on adoption, whether you're working on renewal. Think about all this different tasks and strategies and different aspect of customer success that you work on in your day-to-day. All of those, the end result of all of that, or how you can achieve those, is based on different tasks that you do. You have your different goals, whether they're larger goals or they're smaller goals. And all of these goals, there's a lot of preparation goes in it. There's a lot of planning, executing, monitoring, and all of that goes in it. And in that, all of that is project management. Taking every interaction that you have with your customer and thinking about it from a perspective of, how can I plan this? How can I prepare for this? How can I execute this? And then follow up on it. I mean, communication, relationship building, at the end of the day, every task that you do, can be part of project management. So for that particular reason, I think, a CS professional is definitely 100% a project management, and it should be part of their CS strategy.
Yeah, and just hearing you go through all that stuff is kind of starting to get overwhelming for me, all that work they have to do, so I can see it. And thankfully, later in the discussion, we're going to talk about, how to manage that, how to prioritize it, and,
Yes.
techniques to get really efficient at it. So, Kate, maybe let's just take this one over to you now. If you have any additional things to add to that, or we can switch to the next topic.
Yeah, you guys are going to get tired of hearing me talk about outcomes, but in leading customer success teams, I think we often find ourselves doing a lot of things for the customer, and it's just as important to think about why or what that end result is. It could be a customer testimonial, it could be a happier customer, or for a more mature customer success team, maybe there is an increase in overall utilization over a book of business, or maybe it's an improved renewal or retention rate. But it's important to think about why you're doing the things that you are, and make sure that there is a result that is measurable for the customer's perspective, not just for the company that you're working for.
Yeah, and I'm sure that we're going to go more into that when we talk about how to prioritize the things that you need to do every day. Is, the outcomes that a customer wants is probably going to be high on the priority list. Not going to lead the witness on that one. But to add a little bit more to the idea of the mountain of tasks a CSM has to do, or a CS leader, let's talk for a minute about internal teams, right? Because a lot of times the CS team is that connective tissue between the customer and their voice, and things that need to be shared with sales, product management, and other groups within the company, right? So talk a little bit about that additional set of tasks and projects that CS works on, and how can they do that part of their job well in addition to the other things they're doing. Ashna, we'll go back to you on this one.
Yeah, sure. I think a lot, I would say, has to do with figuring out some I'm going to call it universal, but maybe some processes and guidelines that, here's the interaction that needs to happen at the time of onboarding between sales and CS. And you have your set of, okay, these are the tasks that you need to go through if they're working on onboarding and whatnot. Then that becomes that part of, that beginning part of the project that they're working on, for the end goal of making sure that the customer is successful, customers' expectations are meeting. So I think it's making sure that you're setting the right expectations, not just with your customers, but also internally, and creating those outlines and processes to help you achieve those. I mean, that's all, at the end of the day, could be part of the project management that you're doing for different strategies. So I think that's what I would suggest.
Absolutely. Awesome. And Kate, how about you? Any additional comments you would want to add to this part of the question?
Yeah, just a little tip about internal stakeholders, if I'm not jumping the gun, Dan. When I joined the team at Novadea, and some feedback I had received from a manager early in my career is think about like who internally is on Kate's team. So make introductions to people who you think can be helpful to advocating for your customer, advocating for your team. If you are working on a team of managers, make sure that your network of contacts is as diversified as it can be, and make those introductions and start doing that relationship building before you need something. We hate to have when you get pinged from someone who you haven't talked to yet and they say like, hey, do you have 15 minutes? I think most of us think like, oh boy, somebody needs something from me. So if you're establishing those relationships, and you can then ask for things as you need them and understand what their goals are too. You might be able to help your internal teammates achieve their goals as well.
Absolutely. And the things that I hear regularly when I talk to CS leaders too is around, hey, I'm going to get the firsthand data and probably the most comprehensive data on what customers like, what they don't like, what went well during the sales process, what might have been misrepresented or sold, with a flavor that might have not have been clear. So improvement and feedback back to sales about how they can better set customer expectations. It's another thing that lands on CS. Feedback to the product team about what customers like, why they're churning, what we need to build so that we can prevent future churn. All of that stuff is just additional data that has to be collected, verbatims from customers, as well as just meetings with internal stakeholders to help them do their jobs better to serve the customer too. So not to pile on more tasks onto the stuff that you guys have already mentioned, but I think that's worth everybody thinking about. Okay, cool. So thanks for your input there. That was fantastic. Let's go on to the next topic, right? So what's thinking about the skills that a CS person needs in their day-to-day to perform at their highest ability, right? Let's talk about that for a second. When you look at let's start with you're hiring a new CSM. When you look at a candidate potentially to join your team, what are 2 or 3 specific skills that you look for to know if they're going to be a good fit in a role like this? Kate, why don't you address this one first?
Yeah, my top 2 are agility and curiosity. So agility speaks to the ability to constantly prioritize what is the most important work that I do, what is the most important work that the company does, and what is the most important work that I deliver to my customer. And then curiosity is super important for CSMs to really understand the business, the goals that the customers have. I think, as I'm waiting on Zoom meetings for customers, we're talking about the NBA finals, the weather here in the Midwest, and it's a good time to ask, the early meeting attenders, what are their goals for the quarter? What's on their plate today? What's a win that they've had? And that curiosity and that unending questioning of our customers is, our customers and our business I think that makes it for a great CSM.
Okay, cool. I want to hear what Ashna has to say about this. I might come back to you afterwards and ask you, is there a specific question you ask in the interview process where you vet that out? So stay tuned. Ashna, how do you think about this? What are the 2 or 3 skills that you look for in CSM to join your team?
That's a great question. And I think I'm going to take it a step further than what kind of Kate mentioned, because I think those are definitely very important. Those are also something that I look for too. But I think taking a step further, I mean, the curiosity part of it, that the understanding, I think, the level of understanding that they have in terms of, are they really understanding the end goal? Are they really asking those right questions to understand the end goal? And that discovery should always be ongoing. It should never stop. And I think that's kind of what I would focus on. And then taking from there is being creative. So creativity and being creative to deliver the solution that they need to deliver, and creating, coming back to project management through it, delivering that by communicating different aspects, again, going back to planning, organizing, are they understanding the outcome that they need to achieve? And then they're being creative to create a plan to help them deliver that outcome. So I think those are the different, and then communicating. So that's what I would say, understanding, creativity, and communicating between those.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you. So Kate, I'm going to come back to you as I promised. I gave you 30, 60 seconds to think about some of your favorite interview questions. Does any come to mind?
Well, I'm a non-traditional interviewer, so I do like to ask candidates what their favorite karaoke song is, and also if they play video games or puzzles, because that shows me an aptitude for problem solving. But I think what is impressive to me in an interview is a candidate who's asking me a lot of questions in order to use all of their time with me. I do a 30-minute intro interview, and I'm hoping that the candidate is filling up all that time asking questions, even if it's like, Kate, what is your favorite color? That shows me that curiosity. And as I've been thinking about curiosity and how to assess it. I think secret might be that I may be asking candidates, like, I'm going to give you a topic and I want you to ask me at least 5 questions about dairy farming, and see how they can think on their feet and just ask question after question.
That's cool. Very, very cool. Okay, so the next question around the same topic is the necessary skills that you just highlighted. How might they differ based on, let's say, a different type of product that the CS is responsible for supporting? So there's, really easy niche solutions that are maybe self-serviceable, right? Versus more complex enterprise type solutions that you might be servicing, or the customer type, SMB versus enterprise versus different verticals. Do the skill sets that you're looking for change dramatically in those 2 different types of customer settings? Ashna, would you mind leading us off on this one?
Sure, sounds good. Yes, I would say, there's definitely a difference between, the type of customer, the type of industry, type of even the individual that you're working with on the other side. And that really can, I think that's where I would say the understanding and the creativity part that I mentioned is really comes in place. I think the understanding part is going to stay the same, whether what type of customers that you're working with or who you're working with. It's what are you going to do, whether you're working with a high touch customer, enterprise customers, or you're working with low touch customers, or even some, when you have to use some digital aspect of it. What are you going to do? What plan are you creating? And are you kind of targeting the mass, or are you giving them that one-on-one that they need? So I think that's kind of what it comes to play, and that's where it differs depending on the industry that you're working with, the customer that you're working with, how technical are they, or do they, what type of help do they need? So I think it's every case is different, but understanding, I think that part I would say it really stays the same. If you get the understanding of what they want, then I think you can create the plan that you need to create and help them and be creative.
Cool. So Kate, we just had a question come in about this from Julie. So I'm going to go ahead and ask this question to you. It is, what about the skill of empathy? Is that something you guys look for? If so, how do you assess it? Maybe talk a little bit about that in the role of a CS person.
Yeah, it is understanding the perspective of the user of your software, and always putting yourself in the customer's shoes. I think as a manager of different CSM teams, I have struggled with, is a CSM best if they've worked or they have a deep connection to the end user or the industry that the end user works in, or can you have amazing customer success skills and learn the industry? Either one of those ways that you are profiling the CSMs on the team, you're getting to the point that Julie brings up, which is really understanding not just where your product fits in the customer's journey today, but what is overall on that customer's plate. We all believe software is a need to have. Sometimes products can be a little bit more of a nice to have. Sometimes there are multiple decision makers, influencers, lots of different tools in the tech stack. So understanding that and just what the personal goals of your customer are very important.
Absolutely. Cool. All right. So we got one more question in this area, and then we're going to move to the next thing. Ashna, I'm going to direct this one at you. Do you think CSMs need sales skills as well? And I specifically ask that because a lot of times CSMs are in charge of retention, upselling, expansions, and things like that. So they got the empathy thing down, they're project managers. Do they need to be sellers too?
Great question. I think I'm going to answer it a little bit differently here, but I would say CSMs can be one of the best sellers in an organization. It's because, and I think you do have that, the depth of, and I guess a great amount of knowledge of product or the solution that you're trying to, or the services that you're trying to provide. I think here. So there's the one. You are focused a lot on relationship management and working and nurturing relationships. So I think there's two different pieces in understanding that, call it a technical aspect, and understanding maybe the emotional intelligence aspect, that that the relationship aspect. I mean, that can really actually make you a pretty good a salesperson. So do you need a sales skills? I don't know if you necessarily need to be one of the top, I don't think you need to get a kind of like a classes or something or on sales, and this is how you sell, this is how you do that. But I think it is a question of, can you really work with, most of the time with sales, you're working with quota, whether it's retention or, any of that. So can you really, do you work well when you're pressurized with quota? I think that's the kind of question that I would kind of go back and ask. But because I've seen in my experience, even personally, I've seen it that, I can sell great if I'm not working with quota sometimes, because then I'm not pressurized. I can be free as a bird, be like, and then I'm doing great. But when I'm pressurized with quota sometimes, I'm not doing that great. So again, I think I'm answering this question a little bit differently. So I think you may not need those skills, but over time you will develop the selling skills already because of the different things that you work on being a customer success professional.
Got it. I'm going to give Kate the chance to respond to this one too, only to see if I can create some healthy tension and hearing her disagree completely with what you said. Maybe that'll happen. It probably won't, but let's see. Kate, what do you think about this? Do CSMs need sales skills?
I think everyone who's customer facing is using sales skills. And I do think that CSMs don't really like, in general, the term sales or selling. And so maybe the way to reframe it would be that a lot of the work that we're doing is relationship building or relationship management work. I want to give you an example because I had one happen just this morning, Dan. We were talking about a customer and discussing how to have more effective meeting management. And we talked about a couple of different things. We talked about what is the profile of the lead user or the buyer, and what would be the best way to manage the lead user. We talked about making recommendations, and we talked about, rather than asking the customer, telling the customer. I think those are all kind of concepts of sales without the element of pushing for a close. Although in this case, the close is like getting these weekly meetings back on track and having them, more aligned with our agenda. So sadly, no healthy tension on this question, but maybe
I am going to find a way to create healthy tension. That's just my promise to y'all. All right. Thanks for your comments on that. That's great. Cool. So next up, we have another poll. So would love to see if the audience can jump back in and participate in this one. The question is true or false. I have a solid grasp on all my tasks and to-dos. I don't need any assistance or help to get my job done. We'll give 30 to 60 seconds on this to get responses, and then we will talk about it. Okay, so the results are in, and wow, 87% of people said basically they don't have a solid grasp on all their tasks and to-dos. So overwhelmingly, people might be overwhelmed. So awesome. Let's take a moment to chat about it. Ashna, does this surprise you at all?
It doesn't actually. I've seen this, and I think even with my team, it's a story of and this is what I say. Customer success, sometimes it's things come in wave for you. Sometimes there are times that you think that you have it handled, and then the next 2 weeks go by, and then you're back into the place where things are. I don't have time on my schedule. I don't know what to do. I'm overwhelmed. There's so much going on. You have the same amount of customers. You have the same amount of everything. Nothing's changed, but still. So this doesn't really surprise me. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that, as I mentioned, is, not having enough time to think and not having enough time to actually work on some of these things, and that could be a result of maybe you're doing redundant work. Maybe there are some processes that can be automated. I mean, there's could be countless reasons here that we can they can work on. But yeah, the answer is, it does not surprise me at all.
Interesting. Kate, how about you? What do you think of the results? Maybe again, this might be the opportunity to disagree with Ashna.
I'm with you. I mean, I have this trusty organization device, which is a mid-sized Post-it note that says the day of the week at the top and the task done. Just to try to prioritize and keep track of my own tasks. So it's crazy. It is one of the biggest challenges for a CSM, is staying on top and prioritizing, for sure.
All right. Well, at least we know, given the overwhelming response to that there's lots of opportunities, hopefully, to help them figure out how to get a hold of their to-dos and optimize the way they're working with their customers. So let's talk about that now for a minute. The next topic is, how should you think about prioritization? What techniques might help you? So we'll go to Kate first for this one. But the question, when we reframe the question, drawing from your own experiences, what advice do you have for people in the audience, let's say, on the tactical things that actually work when it comes to task management and prioritization? What has worked for you in the past? What do you advise your team to do?
Yeah, I've got two.
I hope it's not that Post-it note thing.
Yeah, yeah, I only share that with my friends, not my coworkers. Um, Time blocking and personal calendar management has been really helpful for me. So if I need some uninterrupted time to either tackle a project that requires some thinking, or there are a bunch of things that need to get done, I know that I work best in the morning. And if I can have a block of time and hold myself accountable to doing what I have blocked the time for, particularly the things that often fall to the bottom of the yellow Post-it note, that is a really effective way for me to do proactive and strategic work. When it comes to customer communications, one of the things that I learned when I first joined the team at Novadea was that there were a lot of questions customers would ask that I didn't have the answer to, but that communication really helped me with expectations setting. So the trick or the tip is to respond to the customer. And it doesn't have to be immediately, because if you set that real-time response expectation, the customer will expect and demand it in the future. But if you can acknowledge the customer's question and ask them for time to respond to the question, that will really be helpful for managing their expectations in your time. So you get a tough question, you say, hey, I got the question, I will get next steps to you no later than tomorrow at noon. Does that work? The customer says yes, and then you can think like, oh my gosh, how am I going to answer this question? But the customer feels heard and feels satisfied, and they know when they can expect to hear back from you.
Yeah, and you said something at the beginning that resonated with me so much. It was, block time on your calendar for things you actually have to work on that require thinking. I want to add a little bit to that. It's because I block time on my calendar all the time, and I have found I still allow things to distract me and emergency meetings to take that time away. And I recently read a book, and there was one quote in the book that it just stuck with me, and it's going to stick with me for a long time. And the quote was, the most important thing is to keep the most important thing, the most important thing. And basically what you get out of that is just like, don't let yourself get distracted when you've got to do something important. Turn email off, turn Slack off, like shut the TV, get your kids out of the room. Just focus on that one thing, keep it important, and get it done until it's done. Really hard to do, but that's one way to make sure you get the most important things done. Ashna, got distracted there on one of my own personal stories, but Ashna, if you don't mind sharing some of your personal experiences, like what are some of the tips that you would advise people to focus on the right priorities? How do you do it?
Great question. And you weren't distracted, by the way. That was a great add-on right there. I would say take it a little bit differently, because I think I was actually going to piggyback on a lot that you and Kate kind of mentioned already. But I would say is one of the important things which I've seen, I guess, which I've seen even my team struggle sometimes a little bit, is, it's the ability or I guess understand how much you can take and handle at that time and say no. And again, it's a little bit differently than, I think the prioritization that we're talking about, but sometimes it has a lot to do with not realizing that the amount of, what's your bandwidth? Can you really, just because you have that hour of a time on your calendar for today or for tomorrow, you don't necessarily need to fill that up with a bunch of other meetings or anything else that you need. Say no when you know that you can't take it, that's not your bandwidth, and spend that time to reflect on a lot of those things, and spend that time to maybe relook at your to-dos that you have for today and tomorrow and the rest of the week, and see where you can work things out. So I think it's kind of taking advantage of that little bit of a time that you may have, and not getting into this, I need to get things done. But I think it's going to come down to, find yourself time. I have this habit of creating to-dos the day before. So I usually, for tomorrow, I'm going to be, at the end of today, I'm going to create my to-do for tomorrow at the end of today. So I think finding some time, creating some routine for yourself. How can I, what can I do to note down what I need to get done tomorrow or the rest of the week, and then highlight. And then prioritization also is, what's urgent. Even when sometimes it could be one big task, And you can break those down into different pieces. And then what is urgent to get done of that big task, and prioritize based on that. So it's really sometimes understanding what really needs to get done, how much time do you really have on your plate, and then speaking up, saying no when you can't do it, and finding help. I think that's an important part that I would say about
Yeah,
prioritizing.
I really like that because, when I think back to the earlier part of the discussion and we talk about CSMs being highly empathetic and wanting to help, that includes allowing stuff to get put on their calendar or distractions to get them away from one task because they want to help the person who's asking them to do something else. It's a real easy trap to fall into. I do it often myself as well, but it's definitely something that you have to recognize and address and just help when it is the right time to help and continue to focus on the most important things, putting them in priority and not get distracted from your priority. So,
exactly.
Yeah, really good stuff. A lot of helpful stuff in there for me too. I learned a few things I might actually put into practice. Not the note part, not the note and sticky note thing. I'm not going to do that. All right. This is our last topic. So reminder to our audience, if there's other questions that you guys want to ask, either about the stuff that we're talking about or anything else, we're going to have some time afterwards if there's outstanding questions to address. So feel free to get them in. Let's put all this stuff that we just talked about into practice, right? You can prioritize your time. You've got lots of tasks to do, but people still have to operate at scale to serve all their customers and a growing customer list, right? So how do you operationalize some of the things that we talked about today? How do you measure and know if you're doing a good job in task management and prioritization? So let's think about that for a second. How do you put in processes that are repeatable, scalable, maybe even automated to help your team be more operational when it comes to these project management skills? I got to ask somebody. Kate, why don't you lead us off with this one?
Yeah, I think, I have been working in the startup world, so we are some days just trying to keep the lights on, and other days writing a whole ton of documentation, and then we realize 6 weeks later that it's already written someplace else. So, in our world, it is about what do we need to document and what is the appropriate place for that documentation. They've lived in a much more mature CS world where there are so many sources of information and documentation that it's as paralyzing as having no documentation. So really think about what is important, whether that is process or customer documentation or anecdotal customer information. What is important for your teams to gather product feedback, sales feedback, overall company feedback, and then what is the right method and receptacle for keeping that information, and how often do you review it and how often do you share it? In a startup, no one is asking me to prepare a quarterly report of the product feedback from customers, but I'm sure people would love to hear that, what my team is gathering in the front lines, so it can be proactive with that. I think also in our world, it's really important to celebrate wins. And when I present to our CEO on a monthly basis, I always share wins. Sometimes the wins are this team member finally got access to this thing. And this week it was transitioning a customer from implementation to support, and knowing that we had the support infrastructure set up to accommodate the customer. So while we're not in a place today where we are necessarily creating metrics, I think what do we want to operationalize? Where are we going to do that, or through what methods are we going to? And then making sure that we're sharing wins. I think that's been kind of a controversial topic. I don't think it's fluff or wasted time. I think it's really important for team members to keep them motivated.
Got it. All right. Ashna, I want to ask you a different question if that's okay, because everything we covered today, is kind of pointless if you don't measure how well you're doing it and constantly seeking to improve, right? So how do you think about measurement of your ability or your team's ability to manage their tasks and to prioritize things?
Great question. And I feel like this is something that I'm still learning to evolve around, because I feel like it for me, it's sometimes it's ever changing. There's always things that I can improve on, and I'm gonna answer this in a way that, there are things that you can measure based on data, and then there's things that you cannot measure based on data, and it has to be, I'm going to talk about feelings and stuff. Are they managing their time? At the end of the week, if I go in there and ask my team, how was your week? Are they saying, oh, it was stressful, there was a lot of things going on, I mean, I had to put out so many fires? That's is my indicator as a manager to be like, okay, well, there's something that we need to work on. I mean, that's what I kind of look at and measure. And then the other thing, I mean, there's data, and what it means is, are they taking the step that they need to do? Are they working on the task that they need to be doing? We have definitely metrics created. We track performance based on the information that's being input in the CRM for the tasks that they're doing for all the CS, different aspect of CS. And I mean, there's that data part. Data speaks a story, but it's not going to talk about the feelings. And I think I go back and be like, okay, I'm working with them. I'm having more one-on-one time, especially if they're stressful. If they're going through that time when they don't have time on their calendar, I'm trying to spend more time. What can I help you with? And I think, so I'm answering in a different way, but that's what it really does come down to. It is fairly pointless if we're not measuring the right things and we don't know. They might be putting in so much, but they might also be doing a lot of redundant work. And I'll take an example of, if they're, let's take an example of internal teams collaborations. If my team member is working on an onboarding, for example, but the part that sales needs to do in terms of entering the information in a CRM so that my team member can actually take it and onboard. Again, it's kind of an example, but what I'm trying to get to is, it's going to take a longer time for my team member to work on an onboarding, but they don't have the right resources in hand. They're going to have to spend a lot of time, and that creates, okay, well, I'm taking longer than usual on this. That's going to delay all the rest of the tasks that they need to be doing. So I think things like this, where's the struggle? How can I find the struggle that they're having? Where's the gap? What's not working? And again, it could be following the different policies and guidelines that they have, but sometimes it's also about, are they really feeling overwhelmed? Are they really feeling, that they have a lot to do, and it is continuously being like that. So I think those are the things I would say is the feelings and the data. I would rely on both of those.
Yeah, and you made me think of something as you think about the data, right? You can measure like the volume of tasks CS members are doing with their customer base. Like, hey, this account every quarter, I did 50 things for my customers on average. You can marry that with maybe voice of customer surveys, right? And look at how the data compares to, are the customers happy the more tasks you do? Are they equally as happy if you do a lot of tasks or fewer tasks? Or the more you call them, the more angry they get, and they actually give you worse results, right? So there's certainly ways that you can look at data, try to draw some correlations, and adjust how your team is interacting with customers, and maybe even free up some of their time. Did have a couple questions from the audience come in, so I'm going to give this one to Kate, and this one came from Meg. It's a little bit long, so I'm going to read it. You mentioned urgency and also not responding to a client right away and setting an expectation that you're always on and immediately available when they're looking for you. This is generally an issue and seems urgent to a customer. Generally an issue that seems urgent to a customer isn't urgent to us, right? What's your recommended timeline for response to SLA? And what's the best suggestion for how to communicate to them, hey, listen, like, this seems important, but it's not important, without making it come across the wrong way?
There's a lot of stuff in there, so let me do my best to answer. I think I've seen a lot of success in CSMs who are really responding to emails morning and end of day. So maybe 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock, and they are reading through, and they've got an hour set to really dive into responding to emails and doing some of that expectation setting in terms of turnaround. I think if there is no other SLA, you need to respond to all customer requests within 1 business day. So 3 o'clock yesterday, I got to get something out the door to let that customer know that at minimum they've been heard. Probably, 2 to 4 hours on average. That's not immediate, but that's a pretty quick response time. I think Meg also asked the question about something that's urgent for a customer, but maybe not urgent for a CSM. And I think that often occurs because the customer is asking the CSM a question that could be more readily answered by a different team member. I think a lot of those kinds of questions are often support questions and/or support escalations, or like accounting and billing kinds of questions. So, I encourage CSMs to think about, where is my time the most valuable? And even if I can answer a really easy password reset question, think about how I'm also educating my customer. My brain power is not best spent answering password questions. It is best spent by my support team. And in fact, Lynette on my support team can also think of 6 more questions the customer is going to ask after the password reset question. So she's best skilled to answer those questions. I need to think about, what my brain is best served to do. How did I get to all the sub questions?
Yeah, I think you hit that. There was some good stuff in there. Thank you, Kate. So there's one more question around this topic that I had prepared, and then we've got another audience question that came in. So Ashna, I want to give you the question that I had prepared, and then we'll go back to Kate for the audience question. A lot of stuff to do in the world of CS. I think we've all recognized that. Like, how much is too much, right? How do you find the right balance for the CS team members and what they need to do?
Great question. I think the way that I would say is, because it's gonna be different for everyone, and it's gonna be, and even individual in an organization, it's gonna be, it's gonna be different from one CSM to another CSM. And I think the best that I can answer is to ask yourself, do you have a time to reflect on all your activities and communications and everything that you're doing? Do you have time to think in a day or in a week about the things that you're putting in, the outcomes that you're trying to help achieve for your customers? And if the answer on the other side is no, I think then that's your I think that the indicator is it's too much. And why I say this is because reflection, I would say, is for me, I think it's really important is I take time to, whether it's if I'm writing an email to my customer, answering some of their questions, or whether it was at the end of an hour-long sessions that we've had about product or services that I'm offering, is am I really taking the time and asking, was there anything else that I could have done differently? Was there anything else that I should have invited on these sessions? Or what are my next steps out of this? How am I going to take them to the next level to where they need to get to? And if you don't have a time in your schedule to do this for your customers, you need to, I guess, go to your manager or work on your own schedule to figure out, it's a lot on your plate. So I think that's what I would say.
That's right. Because what you just described is like, you are just constantly fighting fires, always in reaction mode, not able to think ahead and really serve your customers well. You're just always responding, right? And so if that's an ongoing thing that you can't get out of that cycle, maybe you need to work on your time management skills. But if that's not the issue, then certainly, you might have just too much being assigned to you. That's good comments and things that people should think about. Look at how their week unfolds and start deciding, or at least start analyzing, how can I get more out of the time I have available? Okay. Kate, this one is for you. It's an audience question. This one comes from Paul. Have client expectations changed over the past 5 years or so in what they want from a project manager on their account? And if so, how?
I believe that customers, I think in the past, project management has really been about like moving the customer along the path of the journey, setting expectations and marking off milestones. And I think that many consumers today are also looking for recommendations or business consulting. I work with a project manager named Paul. Maybe this is his question, but I think a lot of our customers, they're looking for ways to use the software in conjunction with their day-to-day workflows. So a role as a project manager or as a CSM is not to just teach the customer how to use the tool, but particularly in the implementation phase of their life cycle, about how to use the software that they're buying from us in line with their current workflows, or make a recommendation on how their workflows may need to change and how they are going to lead change within their organization. I think it was, pretty much task management and, checking the boxes. And now there's a whole nother layer of management consulting that goes on in CS and project management too.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you, Kate. Hopefully that answered your question, Paul. If there's any other questions, let's get them in now. Give it a few more seconds. And I guess we're done with that. So cool. Listen, that takes us to the end of our discussion today. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Ashna, for participating in it. Your insight was really helpful. I thought the discussion was great. A lot of the points you made were amazing. So thank you for taking the time to prepare and participate in this. To everyone else, thanks for attending. Thanks for your questions. If you have any topics that you want User IQ to do another webinar on, by all means, feel free to reach out to us and send in your suggestions. You've got my contact information up there on the screen. We're going to have another one in September, towards the end, September 23rd. You can register for it already. Seeking to Scale, and how to tackle your growth challenges in CS. So hopefully everybody will come back and join us on that one as well. But again, thanks for your participation and have a great week.
Thank you.